Greetings everyone, this is Sponsored Vocal of the Association of Ishtar and your host of Radio Retro Future. This is a pilot for the Casket Girls audiobook that I'm recording for this YouTube channel, Radio Retro Future. However, I am considering to make this an audiobook because I keep getting questions about that. However, these are all female characters, so I don't want to do it in the usual theatrical style that I've done for my previous audiobooks, that being the Bound for the Sticks and The Wrench in the Machine, which are both available on Spotify. Bound for the Sticks is also available on Audible and various other audiobook sites. That being said, I'm getting close to launching the Kickstarter for the second Casket Girl novel, that being Engines of the Damned. If you are not already, please give that Kickstarter a follow. And if you enjoy this reading of the few chapters that I'm about to do for this channel, please be sure to let me know, so I'm confident that people will support this audiobook upon release. And if you want me to continue putting the entire book on YouTube, please be sure to share this with your own communities, and I might finish the entire book for this YouTube channel as well. But for that, I want it to have reach a certain number of views before I commit myself to that. So with that said, you know what to do if you enjoy this. So let's get straight into the Casket Girls. The Casket Girls, an Association of Ishtar story written by Sponsored Vocal. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents either are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, business establishments, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. The publisher has no control over and does not assume any responsibility for the author or third-party websites or their content. The Casket Girls. Copyright 2024, Sponsored Vocal, all rights reserved. Editors, Caleb Davidson. Interior art by Johan Alexander, Trevornov, Eldon Kauger, Bayou, and Alien in a Lighthouse. Part 1, Chapter 1. 1872. France. Somewhere in the Doux department. Heavy rain was pelting the steel-plated roof of the train carriage as a female inmate lounged on her bunk with her legs sprawled apart like a street urchin. The swaying of her shoulders matched the rhythmic cadence of the train, hurtling across kilometers of tracks at a breakneck speed. Her gaze paced through the prison bars, fixing upon the looming figure in the cell across from hers. There, in the dimly lit carriage, her eyes honed in on the green light adorning the man's neck. As the shadows cast by the electric lanterns overhead obscured the details of his collar, she felt the explosive shackle around her own throat burn into her skin. Tiny green lights flickered all around her, growing brighter with distance for reasons only known to the great Almighty. Inside the carriage to her left, Leon lay supine on his bunk, hands on his belly. On her right, Tiana admired herself in a pocket mirror whilst applying a colorful ointment to her lips. "Want to look pretty for the guards, Tiana?" she sneered at her. Tiana simply squeezed her lips without even looking at her fellow inmate. "How about you take it out on somebody else, Marie?" she answered, and snapped the jar shut. Marie looked up, glad the rain and the occasional screeching of the wheels was droning out the complaints and obscenities from the other inmates. Groaning softly, Marie pulled at her collar around her neck to scratch the irritated skin beneath, reminding her of her own personal guillotine. "Hey, you!" cried the soldier with an African accent. "No touching the collar!" She squinted her eyes at the black man dressed in a zouave uniform. "What you gonna do? Shoot me?" she said as she kept on scratching. "Mademoiselle." She froze the moment upon hearing the dull voice cutting through the roaring of the rain. "I suggest you comply." Marie pretended not to notice Lieutenant Gousclan's dark gestalt contrasting starkly against the ceiling lights. Her hair was standing on end when his voice resounded across the carriage. "Look at me, Pelican!" Slowly, Marie shifted her gaze. Peering from the corners of her eyes, she hid her anxiety for the sunken sockets bearing down on her, for they evoked the image of the desiccated corpses she had seen in the jungles of Guyane. The scar tissue on the right-hand side seemed to drip down his cheekbone like molten cheese, while the gash on the corner of his mouth was exposing the teeth, giving him the features to which Lieutenant Gousselin owed his name. Uncle Henri, the French personification of death. The officer stood there, chest puffed and hands folded behind his back. Defy orders one more time, and you can go back to Ile de Diable, but not the convent, he threatened. Tu comprends? With some effort, Marie raised her head. Oui, Lieutenant. The train wheels produced an ear-wrenching screech as the brakes were engaged. Ah, merde, complained Leon as he awoke from his slumber. Are they? He shut up when he noticed Uncle Henri observing him. Walking past the cages, the lieutenant inspected the cabin's interior. Suspect! If there are no incidents. He paused, reaching for a fever pitch as he stretched his words, then returning to a cold, icy drawl. I might feel more generous with the rum once the mission has been completed. Leon walked up to the door with his head down, muttering. There were fewer of us left last time. As Marie grabbed hold of the bars according to procedure, she stared at the tattooed fists holding the beams opposite to hers. For some reason, he had the English word hope spelled out on his digits and a Christian cross on the back of his hand. The other, however, had an elaborate eye across his knuckles, giving the impression it was looking at her. Marie didn't know what it represented. The leathery eyelids seemed to resemble those of an elephant more than that of a human. Meanwhile, the screeching of metal on metal intensified as the Jean Castell's engine ground to a halt, leaving only the roaring of the rain. As thunder rumbled overhead, everyone was anticipating the release of the locks, while Leon muttered in the cage beside Marie. Mad. They're insane. During the night, mad. It will be all right, whispered a deep, almost fatherly voice. They may not care about us, but we're not expendable either. A loud cringe-induced honk cut through the clatter of the rain. Everyone let go of the bars as the door slid sideways with a metallic clamor. Inmates in white overalls and red vertical stripes and matching caps stepped out of their cages in unison. Marie, like the other women, had her hair cut short due to the lousing measures. Of course, Diana had managed to get a scarf from somewhere to hide her baldness. She always had a knack for those sorts of things. But Marie refused to ask her how she got it. Even if Marie had, her pride would have gotten in the way of doing what Tiana had done. 4 signalese trioleurs were standing guard, hands resting on the sheathed machetes as they ordered the inmates to face the same direction. Marie felt like a child in presence of Paulus, the giant who was standing beside her, towering a head length over all the other men in his column. Hey, Marie was shuddering when Paulus whispered to her. Seen that new guy? Cage 8. She observed the inmate further down the column. The small guy? She whispered back. He's still a boy. Oh yeah? I heard he's a rapist. What are you talking about? You all are. This is different. Listen, I don't want another Henrietta, that's all. Marie frowned. Those Connets deserved it. Oh yeah? I would have preferred to have them used as live bait instead. Then she could have burned them alive. Marie didn't respond as he continued. We would still have Henrietta as a pilot. Now we have that one. Covertly, Marie glanced over her shoulder at one behind her, who was not unlike her, short, plain, with the airs of a housekeeper about her. Janine? What's wrong with her? He shrugged. Don't like child killers, that's all. Did she have an abortion? No. She faced front as the guards cried, Legionnaires! Advance! Shoulder to shoulder, the 2 columns came into motion, marching into the adjacent train carriage. Come on, keep moving, get your gear! squeezing themselves in paths through the tunnel. They entered the next wagon, the Armory, where each legionary had his own locker with assigned equipment. Back to back they opened their lockers to collect the padded body armor, repeating rifles and melee weapons, such as improvised maces, machetes, and refurbished tools. While the men geared up, Marie and the other two women stripped down to their underwear. "Oh, why don't you take the rest off?" Leon gestured as he locked her closet. Marie smirked at him. "To leave something for your fantasies, or are you just jealous of my dress?" "If you call that Iron Maiden a dress," he shook his head, "I don't envy you." She finished putting on her knee and elbow pads to protect her joints. That was about it for protection. "Leon, get out of the way," she said while forcing herself through the crowd of men. She had to be careful not to get an elbow or sharp object in her face as he maneuvered herself through the horde of foul-smelling men. Marie couldn't help but be cautious as he passed the young man Paulus had warned her about. Watching him pulling a gambeson over his head, she noticed a butterfly tattoo on his wrist. As his head popped out of the collar, he looked at Marie with kind, wary eyes. The moment she blinked, he looked away, avoiding the sight of her scarcely clad body. His boyish reaction made her lips curl up into a faint smile. She still didn't trust him. The three women separated themselves from the men as they entered the funnel leading to Hangar 2. The workshop reeked of petrol and ground metal, but Marie preferred it over the smell of the troop sleeper. In here, the atmosphere was serene and cool due to the absence of her fellow legionnaires. Further down the hangar, surrounded by consoles and fuel pads, stood Oriflamme. The length of the quadruped vehicle spanned the width of the carriage, resembling a short bore with two flamethrower nozzles sticking out of the front. A Chassis de Bataille 3, or CB3 for short. These were the so-called recon chassis, which were smaller at the expense of fuel and battery capacity. Still, Oriflamme barely fit inside the carriage's confines, held in place by large clamps and heavy chains, like some beast from legend. Due to the volatility, Oriflamme had its own carriage. It used to be piloted by Henrietta, but now it was assigned to the new girl. Marie did not envy her. Hers and Tiana's were in the next carriage over, Hangar 3. This carriage contained the Chassis de Bataille's Ariel and Papy. Approaching her CB, Marie inspected Papy's legs, which were locked in place at the ankles. He looked similar to Oriflamme in every way, except that Papy's four mitrailleuses were concealed at the bottom of her chevron-shaped hull. Marie touched Tiana's arm, whispering, "Hey, you got it?" Tiana reached inside her underwear and took out a paper bag. "Here's your tobacco." "Does it have the paper as well?" asked Marie. Tiana opened her hand. Yeah, now give me the money." Marie reached inside her hidden pouch inside her drawers and took out the last of her francs. "Here." Tiana opened her hand to inspect the coins in the sparse light. "Fine, bonne chance," Tiana said, and crawled past Papy. "Merci," responded Marie aloof as Tiana disappeared inside the maze of machinery. Marie began climbing up Papy's bovine legs. The knee pad served her well during the ritual. When she reached the top, the hatch was already open. A man called out of the twilight. "Marie!" Marie peered over the side. "Oui, Emile." The macchiato mechanic quickly blew out some cigarette smoke. "We tried adjusting the central axis. Shoved off a bit of the flywheel. It should run smoother." Marie pouted. "I told you it worked fine." He shrugged. "That's not what Hugo indicated." Curling her lips, Marie looked at the calculating machine mounted on the wall. Hugo resembled a closet with many blinking lights and 4 spools of tape. An electric difference engine, they called it. She didn't understand it, but somehow knew everything she did during the missions, from the number of shots fired, distance walked, down to the time she turned each individual lever. What does the machine know of handling a chassis? "What did you say?" Disregarding Emil's presence, Marie slid legs first into the cockpit. Squeezing herself into the cabin, she reached for the latch's handle to close the lid. Dropping down into the canvas chair, she tore open the paper package she had received from Tiana. After rolling herself a cigarette, she reached for a small compartment containing a lighter furnished from a bullet casing. After turning the flywheel, the cigarette caught fire, and she could finally take her first drag in days. As the embers were glowing in the dark, Marie settled into the canvas seat. Staring into the faint light shining through the front window, she blew out a smoke plume while allowing the nicotine to settle in her veins. She wore her dress now, dispelling the feeling of nakedness. Despite the squalor, she found herself preferring this cabin over her cell. The peace, the comfort, it felt like her own little sanctum. Marie took the key out of the ignition and scratched another line next to a collection of notches on the side. If she survived, there would be many more. And Papi hasn't failed her yet. After sticking the key back in the ignition, the console's orange indicator light and gauges came alive, fascinating her like candles in the dark. Marie's fingers glided gently across the handles and buttons. It was like a lover in its own way, something that only she knew how to please. Every awkward procedure, flaw and quirk were simply part of Papi's nature. Hearing the mechanics discuss changes and improvements behind her back made her fearful her mastery might wane. A loud clunk reverberated through the machine as the mechanics detached the foot clamps. Behind her, the engineers inserted the crank, and after a couple of spins the engine roared to life. Her cabin started heating up as the hydraulics activated, lifting it off the ground. Pete seemed a bit unstable at first, but then the legs corrected their posture automatically. How it knew how to stabilize itself was beyond her, but the fact that it did was what counted. As the two-stage ramp folded down, a flash of lightning illuminated the forest of swaying trees as gusts of rain swept by like waves washing over a beach. She stared at the road leading up into the woods ahead and concluded, "It's one of these again." Chapter 2. While rain poured down on the lumbering machine, the heat within Marie's cabin was rising as the CB struggled to climb up the weathered road. Oriflamme marched at the head of the column, while Ariel stayed at the back, along with some of the signalese trialeurs, who struggled as their boots sank into the muddy ground. As the road's incline decreased, straight-edged silhouettes stood in slight contrast to the angry skies above. Dry inside her machine, Marie looked across the swarm of lights emanating from the chest lanterns and bomb colors. The lights they cast on the trees made the resulting shadows sway like flames waking from slumber. The rain had subsided when they encountered a signpost pointing them in the right direction. Marie couldn't read their destination, nor did it matter. The moment they were done, their train would leave this place, never to return again. When the column entered the towns proper, Pepite slowed down when the troop's lights scanned the debris and cobblestones. There was little Marie could do apart from advancing through the narrow street. Then a sudden flash lit up the skies above. A sudden flash lit up the roofs ahead. The burst of light was followed by a sound of a gunshot that reverberated between the townhouses. Another flash. As gunshots resounded through the night, the men scattered, seeking cover wherever they could, lining up their guns in the directions of the unseen threat. Squinting her eyes, all Marie could see were bright bursts emanating from behind the townhouses. A building's roof collapsed, making the silhouette tilt on its side and get swallowed by a cloud of dust. Distant shouts of panic got drowned out by grating squeals of sputtering engines and the endless percussion of the rain. Uncle Henri was passing between the soldiers, shouting orders all the while. Then he turned to face Marie and, with a swing of his mace, ordered her to advance. By the time the unit went ahead, the flashes had stopped. Either those in front had disengaged, Or, well, Uncle Henry swung his weapon overhead, the mace shimmering in the dim lamplight. It was an order to Ariel and a warning to everyone else. Marie closed her eyes. When she opened them again, Ariel's search lamps lit the street brighter than the sun. They were near the town square, with a plain, angular monument to Sainte Marie at its center. A typical French rural community, like the ones he grew up in. Marie surveyed the scene. Brick townhouses with irregularly shaped foundations, stores and stalls whose wares were wasting away in the rain, and the festering remains of a horse in front of a collapsed cart. Upon seeing the medieval church surrounded by an old boundary, she recognized the monolithic stones in the wall right away. This was a repurposed pagan site. Marie had been deployed to such locations twice before, and neither of them had been welcoming. In the meantime, the searchlights had been scanning the ancient buildings, focusing on a wide gash in the church's wall. Marie collapsed, Papy's tusk-like blades in front to prevent the machine from toppling as he instinctively brought her weapons down to bear toward the breach. The penal troops held their weapons at the ready, while standing in a chevron-shaped formation, ignorant of what waited them from beyond the reach of the lights. As the rain was subsiding, Marie could see clearly. Uncle Henry, however, didn't seem pleased at all as he looked up at the sky. "Oi!" cried one of the trailers exploring the graveyard. A fearless one, covered in layers of ritual scars, reached down. When he rose, he raised something over his head, a severed arm. "Put that down!" bellowed the lieutenant. There was another cry. Soon after, 2 troops came running from one of the ruins, screaming, "They're coming!" "You're the last ones?" asked Uncle Henry as the men were catching their breath in front of him. "There were just so many of them," one explained, "and then the house collapsed." Without saying another word, Uncle Henry produced his dreaded controller, a handheld console with an array of switches. He began flipping them, one for one, seemingly at random. In her mind, Marie counted the seconds. At 10, there was a brief fizzing sound like a knife being unsheathed, followed by a volley of explosions going bang, bang, bang on the other side of the church. That was the sound of a dead man's guillotine set to explode, and all it took was the flip of a switch. Strange, hissing barks could be heard in the distance, followed by a throaty gulping sound. It sounded like a dog drinking from a pool. Marie shifted uneasily in her chair. Something was coming. She just knew it. "Attention!" The man assumed their formations when a creature emerged from the dust, an emaciated furless canine with bony protrusions sticking out of its back, wandered into the light, unfazed by its intensity. Its beak-shaped jaws contained needle-like teeth pointing outward, and jet-black eyes bulged out of its shrimp-like head. "Tirailleurs! Fire!" cried Uncle Henry. As 4 sharpshooters fired a volley into the wave, some of the beasts spasmed in death before dropping on their side. Marie observed it by the second. Most of the weird beasts they encountered were flesh and blood like these ones. Still, she was worried. Maybe this was a remarkably stupid breed, but animals did not sacrifice themselves like that, unless... The sounds of more aliens, persistent growling, encroached on them. It wasn't long before more of the things emerged along the ridges, and some even on the houses, using their hand-like paws to climb the roofs. This was unusual behavior. As the creatures closed in, Uncle Henry signaled Oriflamme. At a moment's notice, the machine doused the ruins on the left flank in a jet of flames, scattering all the beasts not caught in the inferno. Within moments, the beasts reformed into new packs and stormed forward with animalistic rage. The frenzied horde raced like rats among the ruins and jumped down from the roofs on top of the men. Then came the signal Marie had been waiting for. Once Uncle Henri swung his mace, Marie squeezed the triggers. Like so many gas-propelled rockets, her mitrailleuse sent a constant stream of grape shots into the horde. The hail of phosphorus projectiles cut up the swarm like the devil's paintbrush, shredding the creatures apart in bunches. Amidst the smoke trails, Marie witnessed the gun flashes and the shapes of men locked in combat with monsters. But as the men were fighting for their lives, it was her job to be standing idle until ordered otherwise. She preferred it that way. No matter what, she couldn't do anything right. So why make the effort? As smoke dissipated, the creatures' numbers had notably dwindled. Some of the beasts fled, leaving smoky trails as the phosphorus shrapnel sheared their hides. Though the wounds seemed minor, they caused enough discomfort for the outsiders to become easy targets for gunfire or the melee weapons wielded by the legionnaires. Surveying the battlefield, Marie's gaze caught sight of the lifeless body of the young legionnaire Paulus had pointed out, disemboweled and missing a limb, so he had fallen to the beast. Well, he probably deserved it. He wouldn't be here otherwise. Looking at the blackened husk of these dogs was making her think. The penal troops had encountered such numbers before, but never this close to a rift. Carnivores were prone to hunting, attacking nearby communities and farms where the food was plentiful. It would explain why these beasts were this thin. It mattered not to Marie. The next encounter would bring entire different creatures with different quirks. At this moment, all she saw was a rubble ablaze and covered with smoldering cadavers. Occasionally she would hear a shot ring out, or a soldier striking a carcass to ensure it was truly lifeless. The battle was over. And yet a sensation of wrongness was still lingering about her, tainting the heavy air as Marie was awaiting further instructions. She wiped the sweat of her brow. Mon Dieu. She reached for the drinking tube and sucked on the straw, sucking in the tepid water. Folding back the straw tube, Marie paused, her attention snagged by a peculiar shimmer right above the ruins. It resembled the reflection of flames in a mirror. Leaning closer to the glass, she scrutinized the scene to confirm it wasn't caused by water droplets on the window. Yet her suspicion deepened when she spotted a stone resting at an angle that seemed physically impossible, as though supported by an invisible force. She squinted her eyes for a closer look. Suddenly, the rock moved, tilting slightly further on its side without falling. Alarmed, her body tensed up and her fingers squeezed the triggers. The roaring of her weapons made the troops flee in all directions as Marie sent a volley of shrapnel into the ruin. "Halt!" screamed the lieutenant as he smashed his mace aggressively on the chassis. As if released from a spell, Marie let go of the triggers. "Stupid broad! What did I tell you?" screamed Uncle Henri, shaking his mace in anger. "I saw something," she muttered, scanning the cloud while dust was sticking to the wet glass. "You what?" "It's invisible," she cried, while staring at the dust covering the ruins. The smoke was moving in odd patterns as the wind was carrying it away. "Lieutenant!" A troop attended them on a small streak of smoke seemingly smoldering from something suspended in mid-air. With caution he thrust his bayonet toward the anomaly. "What the—" In an instant, the man was lifted off his feet and hurled through the air. An enormous serpentine creature erupted from the debris, its shape and size only discernible from the dust and rubble it displaced with considerable mass. Amidst the chaos, Marie could make out smoke rising from rudimentary rings as a result of the sulphurous shrapnel embedded within. Oriflamme expelled 2 undiluted jets of flame in the creature's general direction, while retreating with awkward movements. In a staggering display of incompetence, she inadvertently set man and monster ablaze. Amidst the inferno, the serpentine outline of the beast was revealed. Shrieking like a demon from hell, it spread its disfigured wings while raising its head toward the crimson clouds above. Despite the flames consuming its skin, turning it black like charcoal, the beast lunged at Oriflamme, spreading its shapeless jaw like a crocodile. Uncle Henry held his head high. "Shoot it!" Marie froze as the serpent wrapped itself around Oriflamme with such force it lifted the chassis off the ground, while its legs buckled. The Casket Girl winced as Gus Clamp pounded his mace repeatedly on her cabin. "Shoot! Shoot! Or I'll have your head!" It was just enough to wake her from her trance, prompting her to tighten the grip on the triggers. A storm of sulphurous grapeshot erupted from Papy's guns, tearing through the creature's flesh. Oriflamme erupted in flames, ensnaring the monster in a blazing flame that engulfed its entire body. Rearing up straight, the beast wailed toward the sky, its wings unfurled, releasing sulphurous vapors. Like a living torch, it illuminated the entire town before finally collapsing in a row of houses beside Papy. "Keep firing!" she heard Uncle Henry scream over the gunfire and hissing of dissolving flesh. "Keep firing!" Marie squeezed the triggers again, but all she could hear was the clicking of a spent mechanism. "I'm out!" Marie froze, sensing there was nothing that could be done. She flinched when a trooper before her was knocked aside. Before she could even contemplate what had happened, Papy's canopy cracked. Marie covered her ears as her machine got knocked over like a toy. For a moment, she felt weightless, until she hit the ground and the back of her head collided with the ceiling. There was just blackness, disturbed by shimmering lights coming and going like the flashes of a gun, and felt like she lay on a rock thrusting into her back. Marie tried to move to the side, but nothing happened. As her mind drifted back into reality, the air was permeated with the stench of burning rubber and napalm. Pain radiating from a gash in the left side of her scalp gave the impression her skull was cracked open, and she couldn't move her arms as she lay on the cobblestones, shivering in the rain. "Lieutenant, she's awake!" Marie managed to open her eyes while her tongue kept caressing the place where her tooth used to be. Looking down at her with disdain, Uncle Henry said nothing. "Bien. Take her back to the Jean Castel. I'll deal with her later." Eventually, Marie was lifted off the ground on a stretcher. As she tried to move her hand, there was no response. She tried to shift her foot. No reaction. She wanted to sit up straight to see what happened, but her body gave no inkling of a response. Marie had been paralyzed. Assuming she still had limbs at all. All she could feel was the worst pain imaginable, with no prospect of relief. This was reality now, without a star in sight to wish upon. While being raised to the train to save her life, Marie wished for death. She recalled her older sister telling her of the stars, explaining there was a soul of the dead looking over us. Of course, now she needed them. They were nowhere to be seen. Dumb bitch. Being carried up the road, Marie stared at the crimson clouds. There, against the dark backdrop, she saw the lights soaring by. Something flying above the trees like a bat-sized firefly. Whatever it was not of this world, glowing like a marshlight. Marie peered past the corners of her eyes, following them, observing them. Was the real Uncle Henry coming for her? She groaned, finally understanding how the lieutenant got his name. Hello, this is Bonsert again. I hope you enjoyed this pilot for the first two chapters of the Casket Girls, Book 1. Please let me know what you think of this format. If you enjoy it, I'll finish the rest of the audiobook, which I might publish on things like Spotify and Audible. And in case this video will get enough likes, I might consider putting the entire audiobook up on YouTube as well. With that said, I hope you really enjoyed listening to this. I hope you are curious to the rest of the series. And of course, don't forget that we are about to crowdfund the second book of the Casket Girls, Engines of the Damned. So be sure to give it a follow Link is down in the video description or here up in the corner if I remember to do so. And with that, folks, I hope you'll have a wonderful 2026. I know that I already have a very booked year ahead of me. We have a board game coming up. We are looking for a publisher, but we are making good progress on that. And of course, the publication of Nightwatch we hope to do in the first quarter of 2026, so that will be coming very soon. We're in the final stages of production of that, and yeah. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll have a wonderful new year, and as always, make it your way. Good night.